Her name appears once in the entire Bible. One word, 6 Hebrew letters, in a prophecy about the desolation of Edom in Isaiah chapter 34. Here is what different translators have done with that one word across 400 years of Bible translation. The King James Version published in 1611. Screech owl. The New International Version published in 1978. Night creatures. The Revised Standard Version. Night hag. The Jewish Publication Society, 1917. Night monster. The New Revised Standard Version. Lilith. The Ancient Greek Septuagint. Translated 2,000 years ago. Demons and donkey-centaurs. One Hebrew word. 6 translations. 0 consensus. Across 400 years of scholarship. Tonight, that word, what it is, what it connects to, and why translators have been unable to agree on it for 2 millennia. Let's start with the text itself, because the translation problem is not just interesting, it is evidence. Isaiah chapter 34 is a prophecy of judgment on Edom, Israel's historical enemy. The land will be desolate, the cities will fall. Wild creatures will inhabit the ruins. Verse 14 describes those creatures, hyenas, goat demons, and then the word Lilith. Scholars call this a hapax legomenon. That is the technical term for a word that appears only once in the entire biblical corpus. It appears so rarely that its precise meaning is almost impossible to establish from context alone, because there is only one context. The word Lilith comes from the Hebrew root layil, meaning night. So the most basic translation is simply night creature or being of the night. That is what the KJV translators were reaching for with screech owl, a nocturnal bird. Safe, zoological, nothing demonic. But here is what the Biblical Archaeology Society observed about those translation choices, and I want to quote this carefully because it matters. They wrote that English translators of Isaiah 34, verse 14, sometimes lack confidence in their readers' knowledge of Babylonian demonology. Read that again. The translators knew what the word referred to. They chose to translate around it because they didn't trust their readers to handle the Babylonian connection. That is not a neutral translation decision. That is editorial judgment about what the reader should encounter. The NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, widely used in academic and seminary settings, did not make that judgment. It simply transliterates the Hebrew as a proper name, Lilith. And there she is, in the text. One word, one appearance, and 2,000 years of translators arguing about what to do with her. The translators knew what she referred to. They chose to translate around her because what she referred to is older than Isaiah. Much older. And it is documented. In physical objects people made with their hands to protect themselves. Here is what I want to establish clearly before anything else. People made physical objects to protect themselves from her. That is the starting point. Not mythology, not theology. Objects. The incantation bowls, ceramic bowls inscribed with protective spells in Aramaic and Hebrew, found across Mesopotamia and dating from the 1st to the 8th centuries of the Common Era. Dozens of them name her specifically or depict her in characteristic form. Arms raised aggressively, skin spotted, bound within the bowl to prevent her from entering the home. The bowls were buried upside down beneath the foundations of houses. You trap a demon in a bowl. You do not trap an owl. The Arslan Tash amulets, limestone plaques discovered in Syria in 1933, dating to approximately the 7th or 8th century before the Common Era. Earlier than Isaiah. One plaque contains an incantation that translators have connected to the Lilith, the Babylonian class of night-flying female demons. The inscription reads, in part, "O you who fly in the darkened rooms, be off with you this instant, thief, breaker of bones." I want to be honest that the Arslan Tash amulet authenticity is disputed. Some scholars accept it as genuine 7th century BCE material. Others have questioned it. The incantation bowls are less contested, but together they point to the same thing. She was real enough to people for centuries that they made physical objects, amulets, plaques, inscribed bowls, to keep her out of their homes, away from their pregnant wives, away from their newborn children. Now, where does she come from? Because she does not begin in the Hebrew tradition. She begins in Sumer. The Lilith, Lilitu in Babylonian, are a class of demonic spirits in ancient Mesopotamian religion. Female beings associated with the wind, with the night, with young people who died before bearing children. The Lil root that gives us Lilith in Isaiah is shared with the Akkadian word for this class of beings. The linguistic connection is not disputed. She predates Genesis by centuries. She was already in the world, already named, already feared, already the subject of incantations before the Hebrew texts were written. And yet she makes it into the Hebrew Bible exactly once, as a single word that translators spent 400 years trying to turn into an owl. Physical objects, incantation bowls, protective amulets, made by real people to keep her out of their homes. A Sumerian tradition older than Genesis, one word in Isaiah, and 400 years of translators choosing screech owl. Stay with me, because the most precise chronological document in the ancient world left a 7-year gap it refuses to explain. And the tradition that fills that gap is not medieval invention. It is drawing on something much older. There is a text you may not have encountered. It is sometimes called the Little Genesis. The Book of Jubilees retells Genesis and part of Exodus with one remarkable feature: exact dates, exact years, an obsessive chronological precision that no other ancient text matches. If something happened, Jubilees records when. Creation itself, the flood, the patriarchal genealogies, dated to the month and day, which makes one passage in Jubilees extremely strange. Jubilees chapter 3 verse 15. I want to read this carefully. And after the completion of the 7 years which he had completed there, 7 years exactly, and in the 2nd month on the 17th day, the Lord God brought to him a woman. 7 years. Then Eve. The most precise chronological document in the ancient world records 7 complete years in Adam's biography, 7 years exactly, and provides no account of what happened during them. It notes the years. It records nothing in the years. And then it introduces Eve. That gap is not an accident. Jubilees does not leave gaps. It is constitutionally incapable of vagueness about time. It dates creation itself. It dates the flood. It dates the patriarchal genealogies to the month and day. 7 years, exactly, with nothing in them. The alphabet of Ben Sira, which we will look at in the next act, says what filled those years. A companion, created as an equal, who refused to stay. Now. The alphabet of Ben Sira is medieval, written somewhere between the 7th and 10th century of the Common Era. It is not ancient. But here is the question I cannot put down. Why does a medieval satirical text know about a 7-year gap in the most precise chronological document of the ancient world, a document the medieval author may not even have had access to? I am not claiming the Lilith tradition is historical. I am claiming the gap in Jubilees is real, and that gap precedes the medieval tradition that fills it by centuries. Something was in those 7 years, and something was removed. 7 years exactly, in the most precise chronological text of the ancient world, with nothing in them. Then Eve. Give me 5 more minutes, because the story that fills those 7 years, wherever it comes from, is the part that explains why translators spent 400 years turning her into an owl. The alphabet of Ben Sira is a medieval text, written between approximately 700 and 1000 CE. It is satirical in tone, playful in structure, and was never accepted as scripture by mainstream Jewish or Christian tradition. And yet it contains the most fully developed account of Lilith as the first woman anywhere in the ancient or medieval record. Here is what it says. God created Adam. Then, drawing on Genesis 1 verse 27, where male and female are created simultaneously from the earth, God created a companion for Adam from the same earth, in the same act. Her name was Lilith. Adam and Lilith immediately began to quarrel. The argument was about physical position during intercourse. But the argument was really about something else entirely. Adam insisted on the dominant position. Lilith refused. She said, "We are equal. We were both made from the earth. Neither of us is above the other." When Adam would not concede, Lilith spoke the ineffable name of God, the name that must not be spoken, and flew away from the Garden of Eden, into the air, gone. God sent 3 angels after her, Sanoi, Sansanoi, and Simanjalof. They found her in the Red Sea. They told her to return. She refused. She said she had been created to cause sickness in infants, boys for 8 days, girls for 20, and that she would not stop unless an amulet bearing the names of the 3 angels was placed on the child. The angels agreed. She did not return. And the amulets, protective inscriptions bearing the names of those 3 angels, begin appearing in the archaeological record of the ancient Near East. Now, the alphabet of Ben Sira is medieval. The story it tells draws on Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, the 2 creation accounts that biblical scholars have been reconciling for centuries. The Genesis 1 account where male and female are created simultaneously. The Genesis 2 account where Eve is formed from the rib. The alphabet of Ben Sira is offering a solution to a theological problem that is genuinely in the text. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 describe 2 different women. The tradition that fills that gap with Lilith is medieval, but the gap it is filling is ancient. A medieval story solving an ancient textual problem. 2 creation accounts. 2 women implied. And a tradition that fills the gap with a figure who predates Genesis by centuries. Stay with me for 3 more minutes, because the honest position on what Lilith actually represents in the tradition is not about whether she was real. I want to step back from Lilith specifically and look at what she is part of, because she is not alone. Asherah. In the earliest layers of the Hebrew textual tradition, the inscriptions at Kuntilet Ajrud, the archaeological record of 8th century Israelite religion, Asherah is God's consort. She stands beside YHWH. She is part of the divine household. The Bible references her over 40 times, almost always in the context of condemning her worship. The Asherah poles, the groves, the sacred objects. We covered this in Season 1, the merger of El and Yahweh, the Deuteronomistic reform that centralized and purified. Asherah was part of what was removed. Her presence in the earlier tradition is documented in the inscriptions. Her absence in the later tradition is deliberate. The Genesis 1 woman, created simultaneously with Adam in chapter 1, verse 27. Then Genesis 2 begins again, a different account, a different sequence, and she is gone. There is only Eve, created from the rib. What happened to the Genesis 1 woman? The text does not say. The tradition that answers that question is the Lilith tradition. And now Lilith, one word, in Isaiah, surviving as a hapax legomenon because it was too embedded in its verse to remove entirely, but translated across 400 years as an owl. 3 erasures, same type of figure, same mechanism. The female divine presence, the co-creator, the consort, the being made as an equal, progressively removed from the official record as the tradition consolidated around a singular, male, unaccompanied deity. I am not claiming a conspiracy. The Deuteronomistic reform had theological reasons. The canon had theological reasons. The translation choices had theological reasons. These were real people making real decisions about what their tradition should contain and how it should be read. But the decisions were made, and what they removed has a pattern. And the pattern is what this episode is about. Her name appears once in the entire Bible, 6 Hebrew letters. In a prophecy about desolation and wild creatures in an abandoned land. That one word survived 4,000 years of editing. Everything else was taken. Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like the content, please like, comment, and subscribe to help support the channel. Stay curious. Keep digging. The rabbit hole goes deeper.